Isn't it strange how people spend their lives waiting for applause, for recognition, for validation from the world, and they forget that sometimes the universe is watching quietly, noticing the things no one else bothers to see? Not with bright lights or confetti, not with headlines or compliments, but in the way it keeps a record of every little choice you make, every act of courage, every moment you decided to do what felt right instead of what was easy. And sometimes, just sometimes, that quiet acknowledgement doesn't come as a reward. It comes as a message, urgent, impossible to ignore, slipping past the noise of daily life to remind you that someone, something, has been paying attention, counting every step, every decision, every heartbeat, and that even in your chaos, in your mistakes, in your struggles, you did exactly what needed to be done. And the universe is saying thank you in a way that shakes your chest and rattles your mind and makes you realize that you are not invisible, not insignificant, not forgotten. People live their lives as if no one is watching. They move through the chaos thinking that their smallest decisions are invisible, that their quiet sacrifices, their subtle acts of courage, their choices made in the shadows will vanish without a trace. But the universe has a way of keeping score, a way of noticing even the smallest tremors of intention, the tiny sparks of bravery that nobody applauds. And the strangest, most unsettling part is that it doesn't announce itself, doesn't send a trumpet, doesn't throw confetti or light up the sky. No, it watches in silence. It sees you when you think no one is watching. It measures your every move, and it remembers every choice. Even the ones you try to forget, even the ones you wish didn't matter. That's where the real recognition lives, in the places you never think to look, in the moments you almost fail to notice in yourself. Imagine standing in a room, invisible, unnoticed, doing the work, making the sacrifice, taking the risk. Nobody claps, nobody nods, nobody even looks, and yet, somewhere beyond your perception, every small act is logged, counted, registered, acknowledged in a way that doesn't make a sound, but is more precise than any applause could ever be. The universe doesn't need your attention. It doesn't need your understanding. It doesn't need you to feel proud. It simply sees. And that's terrifying and beautiful at the same time, because it strips away ego, strips away the need for validation, strips away the illusions you've built to make life feel like a game you control. It reminds you that the world is bigger than your recognition, bigger than your applause, bigger than your desire to feel noticed. And yet, in all of that immensity, the smallest things you do are seen, recorded, valued in a way that nobody else could touch. Most people go through life thinking only the big, dramatic moments count. They chase headlines, awards, praise, and attention, believing those are the measures of worth. But the quiet acts, the decisions made when nobody is watching, those are the true currency of the universe's acknowledgement. That's where the gratitude lies, in the unnoticed choice to be kind, to act bravely, to do the right thing when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or dangerous. The universe doesn't clap. It doesn't hand out medals. It sends a subtle, almost imperceptible signal, a ripple that might make your chest tighten, your mind pause, your heart tremble, something that says, I saw you, I noticed. You mattered in this moment, even if no one else does. And most people miss it because it's quiet, because it doesn't satisfy their craving for visible reward, because it's not packaged in something shiny or spectacular. There's a dark humor in that, isn't there? That everything you do can matter without anyone ever knowing it. That gratitude exists even in silence. That recognition doesn't require applause. That the weight of significance doesn't come from human eyes at all. And yet, the universe delivers it with precision, noticing the choices that define you, the courage that shapes your path, the kindness that echoes beyond your perception. It is patient, relentless, and unerring. It sees the hesitation in your step and counts the moments when you pushed forward anyway, It remembers the times you gave when giving was painful, when helping was risky, when standing up meant standing alone. And it waits. It waits until you are ready to realize that every unnoticed act, every quiet moment of bravery, every decision made in solitude, has been acknowledged all along, in a way that doesn't shout, doesn't demand attention. Be you. Tea is more lasting than any cheer, more powerful than any reward. And there's a lesson hidden in that observation, a truth that people rarely face because it's uncomfortable. Recognition from the universe doesn't come on your timetable, doesn't arrive when you expect it, doesn't appear wrapped in praise or validation. It comes in ways you may not notice until much later, when reflection hits, when consequences unfold, when patterns emerge. It comes quietly, as an understanding, a sense that your choices, your efforts, your intentions have mattered, even if the world told you otherwise. People are desperate for immediate validation, desperate for applause, desperate to feel their worth reflected in others' eyes. But the universe doesn't negotiate. It doesn't perform for your satisfaction. It acknowledges what needs to be acknowledged, and it does so with a precision and honesty that no human recognition could ever match. And the realization of that acknowledgement is far more unsettling, far more real, far more meaningful than any surface-level reward people chase blindly through life. Gratitude doesn't always arrive wrapped in comfort. People spend their lives waiting for neat GES for things they can unwrap, admire, and parade around to show that the universe noticed them. But real acknowledgement doesn't arrive with ribbons or applause. It comes in forms that are subtle, inconvenient, even unsettling. It doesn't always feel like a reward. Sometimes it comes as tension in your chest, as that quiet tightening in your gut that makes you pause, as a strange sense of being seen when you thought no one was looking. People want gratitude to be obvious, measurable, undeniable. They want confirmation in the language of humans, words, compliments, signs everyone else can see. But the universe speaks differently. It communicates in whispers, in vibrations, in moments that make you stop and wonder why the world feels slightly off kilter. And that's where real acknowledgement lives, hidden in the uncomfortable, almost imperceptible spaces where people are too distracted, too arrogant, too busy to notice. Think about the last time you did something quietly, without attention, without expectation, without anyone around to admire it. Maybe it was a choice to act kindly when anger would have been easier. Maybe it was a moment of courage, a step taken when the easier route was to flee. Maybe it was patience, restraint, integrity, moments that felt invisible, meaningless, thankless. And yet, in those moments, the universe noticed. Every hesitation, every small act, every whisper of conscience, recorded, acknowledged, weighed, but not in the way humans expect. It doesn't arrive as applause. It doesn't hand out trophies or certificates. It manifests subtly as a sense of recognition that you can't explain, a feeling of alignment, a quiet acknowledgement that the world, the universe, whatever force shapes reality, has noticed the choices that define you when nobody else did. And isn't it deliciously cruel that people often fail to recognize this? They think only the visible, the loud, the dramatic counts. They chase recognition in the form of praise, acknowledgement, proof that the world sees them. But the real message, the real gratitude, is invisible. It's in the quiet actions that ripple outward in ways you can't measure, in the choices that shape outcomes long after you've forgotten the moment itself. It's the universe saying, in its own strange, unsettling language, I saw you, I noticed, you mattered. And most people miss it, because it doesn't feel like reward. It doesn't conform to their idea of significance. It doesn't stroke the ego. It forces humility, patience, reflection, and that's uncomfortable. People crave clarity, but the universe doesn't give it so neatly. Gratitude isn't always clear because clarity isn't always necessary. Sometimes the acknowledgement comes first as unease, as tension, as discomfort that makes you question your path, your choices, your intentions. And only when you lean into it, only when you reflect, only when you understand the subtle architecture of cause and effect, do you realize that the gratitude has been there all along, hidden in plain sight. It's almost ironic, isn't it? The universe notices everything, counts everything, acknowledges everything, but it doesn't deliver it in the packaging humans prefer. It's quieter, sharper, more precise than any applause, more accurate than any compliment, more reliable than any validation you seek from others. And the beauty of it lies in that subtlety. When gratitude comes quietly, it forces you to confront your own awareness, your own understanding, your own perception of meaning. You cannot rely on it to make you feel important. You must feel it yourself, recognize it yourself, internalize it yourself, and that makes it stronger, more potent, more intimate. It is not decoration, it is not performance. It is raw, real, and inescapable. It doesn't matter whether anyone else notices. It doesn't matter whether the world applauds, because the universe is already keeping score, already acknowledging every act of courage, kindness, patience, or honesty, and it does so in a way that is invisible yet undeniable, silent yet profound, subtle yet precise, and it is only when you stop chasing applause that you finally hear it, feel it, recognize it, understand that acknowledgement doesn't need to scream to matter, doesn't need to be obvious to be powerful, and doesn't require validation to be real. The moment before a real test isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with fanfare or music. It doesn't arrive as a spotlight or applause or validation. It comes as a pause, a breath held too long, a heartbeat that skips, a question whispered in your mind that you can't ignore. Do you really want to do this? Do you really want to step forward? Most people rush past it, thinking hesitation is weakness, thinking the signs of danger are inconvenient. Oh, obstacles to their grand performance. But that pause, that trembling second, that doubt crawling like a cold hand down your spine, that is the real measure. That is the universe asking whether you are ready, whether you understand the weight of your choice, whether you are willing to face the consequences that come inevitably from stepping forward without clarity. And the irony is delicious. People call it fear, they call it doubt, they call it overthinking, but it is actually the quietest, most honest test of courage, patience, and awareness that life ever offers. Think about it. How many times have you felt that hesitation? That moment when your foot hovers over a line you weren't supposed to cross, when your hand is inches from a choice you'll regret, when your mind whispers the truth you refuse to hear. It is brief, fleeting, easy to ignore, easy to rationalize, easy to convince yourself doesn't exist. Most people don't listen. They push forward with bravado, with pride, with the arrogance that says, I am clever, I am strong, nothing can touch me. And the universe watches, patient, waiting to see if you'll stumble or if you'll pause, waiting to see whether you will recognize the edge before it swallows you, waiting to see whether your awareness is sharp enough to notice the consequences hiding in plain sight. That moment before the choice is the only thing standing between you and chaos, and most people never recognize it because it is invisible, intangible, uncomfortable, and utterly terrifying in its honesty. The cruel joke is that most people fail this test repeatedly without even realizing they are being tested. They see only the immediate path, the immediate reward, the immediate temptation, and they ignore the subtle signals that scream, whisper, and tremble beneath the surface. That hesitation, that doubt, that tension is the universe reaching out in the only way it knows how, saying, stop, consider, look again. But people are deaf to subtlety. They interpret it as weakness, overreaction, paranoia, instead of what it truly is, the moment where courage and wisdom intersect, the fork where self-destruction can be avoided, if you have the eyes to see it, the patience to heed it, and the honesty to acknowledge it. The moment before a bad choice is exquisite in its precision. It reveals everything about you, your instincts, your priorities, your fears, your strengths, your weaknesses. It strips away illusions and exposes raw truth, the kind of truth you cannot argue with, cannot hide from, cannot negotiate with. And yet most people ignore it. They convince themselves that they are above caution, that they are exempt from consequences, that the thrill, the power, the satisfaction will outweigh the risk. They never realize that hesitation is not hesitation. It is clarity. It is insight. It is a warning in its purest form, a chance to turn back, to step aside, to avoid the disaster you have been flirting with. A chance that is often wasted because humans are impatient, arrogant, reckless, and far too eager to believe they are untouchable. And when people finally pay attention, it is usually too late. The edge they ignored is already beneath their feet. The consequence they refuse to acknowledge is already wrapping around them, precise, patient, relentless. But the moment before a bad choice is not about the consequence. It is about the test. It is about seeing clearly, choosing deliberately, acknowledging that the chaos waiting for you is real and that your step forward carries weight beyond imagination. That trembling pause, that breath held too long, that shiver down the spine is the universe asking you to consider, to pause, to recognize, to survive. Those who listen to it, who heed it, who respect it, discover a truth far more powerful than fear, the power to step back before destruction, to redirect their own path, to wield their own destiny with awareness, to emerge intact when others falter because they ignored the smallest, quietest, most honest test of our intervention. Never comes in the way people expect. Nobody wants to be stopped. Nobody wants to have their momentum interrupted, their choices questioned, their pride shaken. People live as if life owes them smooth roads, as if chaos and consequence are optional, as if guidance should arrive with fanfare and comfort. But real intervention doesn't come neatly wrapped or politely announced. It arrives messy, inconvenient, and unsettling, often disguised as frustration, restriction, or discomfort. And most people hate it, resist it, curse it, call it unfair. And yet, in that disruption, in that interference, in that sudden halt to what you thought was your plan, lies the universe's sharp, precise acknowledgement that someone is paying attention, that Mayone, something is counting, noticing, guiding, even if you refuse to see it. People are blind to intervention because they want confirmation in their own language. They want signs that are obvious, validation that is unmistakable, applause for choices made in chaos. But the universe doesn't perform for approval. It doesn't bend itself to ego or expectation. It communicates in the only way that works for those too arrogant to notice otherwise. It nudges, it pushes, it interrupts, it creates friction. And friction is messy, it is uncomfortable, it makes you stumble, it forces awareness, it forces attention, it forces recognition of the truth you were too proud, too stubborn, too careless to see before. The people who call it punishment, frustration, or bad luck are usually the ones who never noticed the warning hidden in plain sight. They failed to read the subtle signals, and so the intervention escalates until it cannot be ignored, until it cannot be rationalized, until it breaks through the illusions of control and safety that they so desperately cling to. Intervention is precise because it is patient. It doesn't shout unless you refuse to listen. It doesn't punish unless you persist in ignorance. It is relentless, not because it is cruel, but because it must be. Subtlety is ignored. Hesitation is brushed aside. The universe waits until the moment where action without awareness would bring disaster, and then it acts in the only way capable of piercing arrogance, ignorance, and distraction. That is the dark beauty of it. Intervention is never arbitrary. It is never random. It is exact, calibrated to your blindness, to your missteps, to your refusal to see the edge until it becomes unavoidable. And most people scream at it because it is uncomfortable, inconvenient, because it interrupts their story, because it forces them to confront the chaos they thought they could ignore. And the irony is delicious. People rail against the intervention that is actually saving them. They see only the friction, the halt, the unexpected obstacle, and they curse it. They blame circumstances, luck, authority, fate, destiny, anything but themselves. They fail to recognize that the discomfort is the signal, the interruption is the message, the interference is the act of recognition. It is saying, you cannot continue blindly. You are stepping too far. Stop, pause, notice, and only those who pay attention, who lean into the discomfort, who accept the intervention without resistance, begin to realize the magnitude of what is happening. They see that every disruption, every restriction, every obstacle is not punishment but acknowledgement. It is the universe saying, I see you, I notice you. You matter enough to be stopped before you destroy yourself. People want intervention to be polite because politeness is easier to accept. They want recognition to be obvious because obvious is easy to understand. But life is not polite, and acknowledgement is not simple. The moments that stop you, frustrate you, shake you awake, those are the ones that carry the weight of real understanding. They force confrontation with self, with consequence, with reality. And the lesson hidden in that friction is that guidance often comes disguised as something you hate, something inconvenient, something you would resist if given the chance. It is the universe's way of cutting through distraction, arrogance, and denial. It is the only way some people ever notice that someone is paying attention, that someone is guiding, that someone is saying, you were about to cross the line, and I will not let you go unnoticed, even if it means shaking you awake in the most uncomfortable way possible. And the brilliance of intervention lies in its subtlety and persistence. It doesn't demand applause. It doesn't seek gratitude. It doesn't bend to pride or expectation. It only exists to redirect, to nudge, to wake up those who are too blind to notice otherwise. And it waits as long as it can. Always precise, always patient, always unavoidable, until the message finally cuts through the noise, until the person finally sees the truth hidden in the friction, the disruption, the unexpected halt, the uncomfortable shake, and begins to understand that being stopped is sometimes the only way to survive the path they were blindly walking toward. Being stopped never feels good. People imagine it as punishment, as humiliation, as a cruel twist of fate designed to ruin their plans. They hate the moment when motion halts, when momentum is interrupted, when the path they believed was theirs suddenly disappears under their feet. They curse it, rail against it, throw tantrums, argue, negotiate, but the truth is far stranger, far darker, and far more precise. Being stopped is rarely punishment. It is intervention. It is recognition. It is the universe, the world, reality itself saying, not yet, not like this, not this way. And most people don't see it that way. Most people are too consumed by their own desires, their own pride, their own blind arrogance to notice the subtle architecture of the stop, the careful timing, the exactness with which it arrives, as if reality itself has been counting every step and knows precisely when it must act. Think about it. How many times have you been halted by forces you labeled inconvenient, unfair, impossible, when in fact they were saving you from a catastrophe you were too blind to perceive. A hand of law, a gut feeling, an obstacle, a warning, something invisible pressing back against your reckless motion. At first it irritates, it frustrates, it makes the chest tighten and the mind spin with indignation. People mistake the stop for an enemy, and yet in the same precise moment, it is a lifeline. It is protection disguised as frustration, guidance disguised as interference. And the cruel, ironic part is that the stop works only if you eventually recognize it, if you pause long enough to hear the subtle message, to feel the way of the caution, to see the hand reaching out to redirect you before chaos swallows you entirely. The universe doesn't negotiate, it doesn't plead, it doesn't explain itself in ways humans prefer. It simply stops you at the exact moment when unchecked momentum would lead to destruction, and it is relentless in that precision. People fight it at first. They resist, they curse, they demand reasons. But the stop is patient. It doesn't need your approval, your understanding, or your gratitude. It simply exists. And the truth, the terrifying, beautiful truth, is that the stop is often far more intelligent than the human who experiences it. It understands timing, consequences, danger, limits, and the fragility of life in ways that defy comprehension. The hand that halts you is not there to punish. It is there to preserve, to redirect, to make sure that you live long enough to make the next choice, the right choice, the choice that will matter when all illusions fall away. People are rarely patient enough to see it. They want freedom without consequence. They want the path to continue smoothly, without friction, without interruption. They think they are clever, untouchable, above the rules, above reality itself. And that is exactly the trap, because the moment you believe that, the stop arrives. Subtle at first, easy to ignore. A pause in traffic, a hesitation in instinct, a warning in the form of a feeling, a circumstance, a law, a hand on the shoulder that says not yet. And if ignored, it grows, escalates, becomes unavoidable, undeniable, impossible to rationalize. People scream injustice, cry unfairness, rage against the hand that only wanted to protect them, and in doing so, they reveal their own blindness, their own arrogance, their own inability to see the pattern, the rhythm, the guidance hidden in the interference. And isn't that deliciously ironic? The same people who resist the stop are the ones who needed it most. The stop is precise, patient, relentless, and utterly indifferent to pride. It doesn't judge your motives or intentions. It only cares that your motion, unchecked, would lead to chaos. And for those rare few who notice, who pause, who lean into the disruption instead of pushing against it, the stop becomes a revelation. They begin to see patterns, the invisible hands, the silent corrections that have been guiding them all along, the moments when the world intervened precisely to save them from themselves. They recognize that the stop, far from being punishment, is acknowledgement, preservation, a gift hidden in discomfort, disguised as frustration, wrapped in inconvenience, and delivered in the only language humans are often capable of ignoring until it is too late. The stop is patient, it is relentless, it is precise. It waits for those who refuse to see until the moment when ignoring it is impossible. It interrupts, interferes, frustrates, shakes, awake those who have been walking blindly toward consequences they cannot yet comprehend. And in that moment, those who notice finally understand that being stopped is not humiliation. It is acknowledgement. It is recognition. It is protection. It is the universe saying, I see you. I notice you. You are not yet ready to fall, and I will not let you cross this line until you are aware of the path you tread, the choices you make, and the chaos that waits beyond the boundary. You are about to cross the grip of reality tightens when people least expect it. People move through life believing they are untouchable, clever enough to dodge consequences, strong enough to outrun warnings, smart enough to cheat the inevitable. They imagine freedom is infinite, that choices are theirs alone, that chaos will tiptoe politely around them. And for a while it does, or at least they convince themselves it does, until something invisible presses back, until a hand they cannot see stops them in their tracks, until the walls they thought didn't exist suddenly appear, cold, solid, immovable. It's subtle at first, a twitch of unease, a hesitation in the chest, a whisper that crawls under the skin. This isn't the way. And if ignored, that grip tightens, relentless, precise, inevitable, until it leaves no escape, no excuse, no argument. People call it unfair, they call it cruel, they call it fate or bad luck or a conspiracy. But it isn't any of those things. It is the architecture of reality enforcing its rules, the necessary resistance that keeps chaos from swallowing those too blind, too arrogant, too reckless to notice otherwise. Think about it, how many times people brushed aside the subtle signs, ignored the hesitation, dismissed the warning, laughed at the edge as if it didn't exist. And in that arrogance, in that delusion of control, the grip waits, patient, precise, unyielding. It tightens just enough, at just the right moment, to force attention, to expose blindness, to shake the illusion that freedom is limitless. The moment is terrifying because people want to feel in control. They want momentum, the satisfaction of movement, the illusion that choices have no weight. And then, suddenly, motion stops. Resistance presses in. Reality claws at the edges of perception, and they realize the universe doesn't negotiate with arrogance. It doesn't bend for pride. It doesn't wait for consent. It simply tightens its grip, and in that pressure, reveals its brutal honesty, the sharp clarity of cause and effect, the undeniable truth that motion without awareness can only lead to catastrophe. People fight the grip at first. They curse it, argue with it, stomp their feet, scream at the walls closing in. They mistake it for oppression, punishment, cruelty, when in fact it is the only thing standing between them and disaster. And the irony is delicious. The very resistance they rail against is the protection they need, the invisible lifeline they cannot yet understand, the subtle force preventing them from stepping over a line they aren't prepared to survive. It is patient because human arrogance is persistent. It is precise because chaos is unforgiving. It is relentless because consequences cannot be negotiated or ignored indefinitely. And the terrifying beauty of it is that the grip doesn't lie. It doesn't twist the rules to teach a lesson. It simply enforces them, quietly, steadily, with surgical accuracy, and only those paying attention, only those willing to notice the subtle tension, only those brave enough to feel the squeeze without panicking, begin to see its true purpose. Most people are too impatient. They want to break free, to rush forward, to pretend that resistance is weakness, that caution is cowardice, that friction is an enemy. They do not realize that the grip exists precisely because unchecked momentum would destroy them. It doesn't punish them, it doesn't humiliate them, it doesn't conspire against them. It restrains them, nudges them, forces them to confront limits they refuse to see, confront they cannot yet comprehend, confront the edge they are dangerously close to stepping over. And when they finally notice, when awareness pierces the panic, when they feel the subtle intelligence behind the pressure, they glimpse the dark perfection of the universe's timing, the cruel beauty of intervention, delivered without ceremony, the precise way the grip waits until the exact moment when the lesson cannot be ignored. The grip teaches clarity, patience, awareness. It exposes arrogance, folly, ignorance. It forces recognition of cause and effect, freedom and consequence, chaos and order. It doesn't bend to expectation. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about pride, desperation, or anger. And the lesson is brutal in its honesty. The world is not a playground for the reckless, the clever, the impatient. There are boundaries, and the invisible grip ensures they are noticed before it is too late. Those who understand it, those who lean into it, those who acknowledge it without screaming, discover something terrifying and beautiful. The grip is not an enemy. It is preservation. It is guidance. It is the only thing keeping them from stumbling into destruction they cannot yet say. The only force capable of turning near catastrophe into survival. The only teacher patient, precise, and relentless enough to force awareness where arrogance blinded the senses. Accountability isn't